till someone pushed him and he fell on the front page of America. And all the bright stars came out and shone in his defense. Rehabilitation, what a joke. Is it off to Betty Ford for the hand he blow? And the bone of contention has all our attention. The bone of contention was all our invention. Gonna burn the playhouse down. Death by his own hands when the black
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, podcast fans of all ages. I am Dave Valente. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive, joined as always by Dan Layman Fishman.
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
This is we're not doing an episode on Mexico, man.
Because of tariffs, I'm not allowed
Because we're
to return
tariffing
the show.
Spanish language,
So,
yes.
exactly.
You
I'm
have
getting
to,
taxed
you have to
on,
use 20% more words.
Exactly.
And joining us tonight is Tony DeRazio. Tony, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Tabernacle.
All right. Tabernacle. Very nice. So wanted to have an episode tonight because in 2 weeks and a day, we're going to be seeing an election in Canada, which probably 2 months ago, we would have seen this going a completely different way. Completely flipped on its head. But let's, before we get too deep into the reasons why this election has gone really sideways for the Conservative Party of Canada, let's talk about what the Canadian political system is. Much like it is a member of the British Commonwealth, so just like the Brits, they have a Westminster parliamentary style system. Their constituencies are called ridings, which is, kind of a cool little term. I don't even know what Tony, do you know why they call them ridings?
I don't, and I've always wondered that, and I've never bothered to look it up.
I've heard like it's, the distance from is what you can ride in one day or something like that was kind of the generational one, but it doesn't make sense. But I don't know. But that's what they call their political constituency. So, like,
look at some of those ridings in the West.
Yeah, definitely.
It comes from the Old English word thriding, which means
Thriding.
a third part of the country.
Wow. Interesting. We learned something today. All right. But ridings, just think of ridings in a U.S. context as being essentially a U.S. House district. It's a bicameral legislature. Much like most of the parliamentary systems, the lower house has most of the power in the system. So the lower house is called the House of Commons, just like it is in England. And of course, to govern, you have to have. Canada's a little interesting because you can have a minority government, which means in fact, the current government is a minority government, which means one party has less than half of the seats, but they govern from that position. And again, parliamentary systems are both fantastic in that they do kind of encourage more collaboration amongst the parties to get things done, but they're also a little unstable because while a government is elected for a 5-year mandate, it can collapse at any time. And elections can be called at any time. In fact, this election is being called a little bit earlier than what the mandate goes. The mandate, I think, ran until October of this year.
Correct.
And Justin Trudeau, the former leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, who was really on a way to getting just trounced in this election, decided to resign, and the Liberal Party of Canada decided to elect as its leader a gentleman named Mark Carney. We'll get into his profile in a little bit. And Mark Carney, towards the end of March, decided to declare an election. The other really nice feature of a parliamentary system is the elections are really short. Mercifully short, 36 days from the time that it was called.
You're not electing a national figure.
Well, you're not. Yeah, technically, you're not electing a national figure. I mean, you can make the argument that people are voting for, while they're voting for a member of parliament, they're really they're looking at the national leaders and who's going to lead the national interest.
Yeah, but I mean, you do see the local people having an impact. I mean,
yes,
if Labor's doing terribly, then they're doing terribly because they're doing terribly across the country, right? It's not because the Labor Party is particularly doing well. It's the Labor Party has lost the country. And that's a phrase that they use as well.
Well, not Labor.
And I think that's where Canada was heading before Trudeau stepped down. I mean, if you looked at some of the polling before Trudeau stepped down.
Oh yeah. In fact, let me bring something up.
They weren't even going to be the official opposition. Bloc Québécois was.
Yeah.
Bloc or actually, NDP was probably the closest to being the official opposition.
Before you pull that up, I want to talk about just quickly Canadian Upper House, which has a hockey reference in it. It is referred to as the Senate, 2 members from each province, and depending on what happens this year, instead of or not this year, the next 5 years, instead of calling it the Senate, they may call it the House of Connor, depending on how well all
House
the various
of
Connors
Connor
in the NHL do.
Well, it feels like half the league is now named Connor. I'm not really
Exactly.
sure why.
Either first name or last name.
Yeah. But this is the polling trends of this election. So you see, the blue line here is the Conservative Party Canada. So let's kind of do a level set on what the parties are. Tony, if you want to jump in and kind of describe the parties of Canada.
Sure. And I know it's really easy for an American audience to think, oh, the Conservatives are the Republicans, which, by the way, the Conservative is the blue party in Canada. And the Liberals are the Democrats. The Democrats are the red party in Canada, which is sometimes hard for people to understand. But really, there's some analogies, and the Conservative Party have scooted a little farther right, but really they're a center right party. They're not a far right party, or they haven't been. There is another party that is the People's Party. I believe they're represented.
They're at the very bottom there.
PPC.
They're terrible. But they are
Maxime
a far
Bernier
right.
is the leader of the People's Party.
Maxime Bernier,
former Conservative.
Correct. He formed the People's Party when he lost the leadership election in the Conservative Party several years back. I don't remember who he lost it to. It was a guy who came before Polyev. I don't remember off the top of my head. So they're kind of a center right party. They've been very much of late. They're led by Pierre Polyev. And I know there's that RE at the end that throws people off. It throws me off sometimes too. I always want to say it's Poilievre, but no, it's just Polyev. Grew up in Calgary, Alberta being a traditional conservative stronghold for in Canada, and is now is in the Carleton riding, which is in Ontario. So they've been very much aligned with good relations with Trump, and a lot of the challenge of this election for the Conservatives, and why they have personal opinion, why they've taken a little bit of a dip, is partly attributable to the fact that Poilievre has long been a fan of Donald Trump.
It's worth mentioning too that when we talk about conservatives in America and liberals in America, most Democrats, and I'm not talking about Bernie Sanders, but most Democrats in the United States would be far right in any other country. As a perfect example of this, although conservatives talk about gun rights, nobody's talking about constitutional carry or what we would consider gun rights issues, certainly from the libertarian side of the platform. There's nobody in Canada who's talking about getting rid of the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. Their equivalent
using
of
their
the
poll
BBC,
tracker.
public television. And when they look at us, and anybody looks around the world, and they see, sort of talk about, Americans saying, "Oh, we're going to get rid of PBS" or something like that, it's when they start to realize, wow, those guys are on a different level of smaller government.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and let's explain the graph here. So as Tony alluded to, the red party is the Liberal Party of Canada, the center left party. The blue line here is the Conservative Party of Canada, center right. The NDP is the farther left party. The Jagmeet Singh is the party leader of that party. He's been around for a long time, and as you can see in the trend line here, they were really close to being, overtaking the Liberal Party, and we'll talk about what date that fell on when we get back to some of the deeper dive into the chart. The BQ is the Bloc Québécois party. Yves Francois Blanchet is the party leader of that. It is a separatist party based out of the province of Quebec. They want Quebec nationalism, and they've seen a little bit of their fortunes fall as well. The Green Party of Canada has traditionally had probably one or two seats the last 20 years or so, and Elizabeth May is one of the party leaders. Who's the other party leader?
Jonathan Pedneau. He's Quebecois.
Okay,
they're co-leaders.
Okay, and then of course the People's Party of Canada with Maxime Bernier. There is a Libertarian Party of Canada. Boudreau, I believe is his name. Jacques Boudreau is the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. They don't run enough to qualify for major party status in Canada. Enough candidates. I think you have to run at least 50 candidates to achieve major party status in Canada. But they've had that in a couple of elections before. We've had their leader on when the deep dive was on the Libertarian main channel a few years ago during the last election, and Tim Moen, and but those are the main parties in Canada right now. So let's take a look at this chart because it's very interesting. The Conservative high watermark in this election was on January 20th, 2025.
What else happened on that day, Dave?
Something else happened that day.
I believe that was the day that Kansas City defeated the Steelers. No, that's not it.
No,
It's
that is the day that Donald Trump was inaugurated.
Oh,
and going downhill from there, the Conservative Party is now sitting at 38% flat.
And to be clear, that this was an election that people said the conservatives can't lose. It was a generational changing election. Oh, we offended Tony.
No, Tony's got audio issues. So he's
Yeah,
jumping for a sec.
I'm just kidding anyway. But it was.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a slam dunk for them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was supposed to be a generational changing election.
Yeah,
because
I mean, we were.
Trudeau had a major impact.
Yeah, I mean,
President steal your girlfriend, or prime minister steal
Prime
your
Minister
girlfriend.
steal your girlfriend. Yes, I mean Tony Blair. No, I mean you could compare Trudeau to like a Tony Blair like existence because Tony Blair flipped the British Parliament from the years of Thatcher and Majors and flipped it to a liberal or Labor Party majority. Bring Tony back on. What's up, Tony? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
There he is. There he is. But we were talking about how the election was. I mean, up until January 20th, this election was supposed to be an absolute slam dunk for the Conservative Party. It was supposed to kind of flip one of these major flips, like Brian Mulroney or Stephen Harper, those type of flips to the Conservative Party that we haven't seen in a while, because you have Prime Minister steal your girlfriend, who had been relatively popular. I mean, he had some major missteps, but been relatively popular until the last few years. And some of the issues that had been nailing Canadian politics is like,
spillover from the United States.
I shared one of them was the affordable housing issue in Canada. There's a guy who does a TikTok YouTube channel that talks about buying Canadian property versus European castles. And he brings out like these massive estates in Europe, beautiful castles, and they're going for like 1.3 million or something like that. And then he's like talking about a house in Scarborough, Ontario, and it's going for 1.4 million, and it is a shell of a house. The property values up in Canada have just so ridiculous. And it's not just Toronto, and it's not just Vancouver, but even smaller places like Saskatchewan, that
Right.
Regina, are having issues with affordable housing.
Because the housing market is so incredibly controlled.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just build a house in Canada.
Yeah.
You have to get all sorts of permissions. It's interesting, actually. I followed these people who were essentially homesteaders in British Columbia, and they were on an island where you could only reach it by boat. They sailed there. They cleared out the property themselves, put up a couple yurts, built their own dock, et cetera, et cetera. And then the British Columbian government said, "Oh, you guys actually have a house now. So, you're going to have to start paying taxes at 20 times what you've been paying beforehand." And just crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they wanted to start putting new buildings onto their structure, onto their homestead, they were forbidden from doing it. So they actually had to leave and go live in Costa Rica.
But the economy had been a huge issue, and then what had driven Tony, or I keep wanting to calling him Tony Blair, but Justin Trudeau, from power. He announces probably it was the early January where he announces that he is going to leave the prime ministership, and they're launching a leadership fight of the Liberal Party of Canada, of which Mark Carney becomes the leader of the party and now the prime minister, after meeting with the Governor General of Canada and transitioning the government. So now he is the prime minister of Canada. His prerogative was to call the election. So Mark Carney is an interesting character.
He is. He is not a politician. He's been a politician for maybe a month and a half.
Yeah. What is his career?
He was a CEO. He was a banking CEO. He if you he led the Bank of he led the Bank of Canada.
He was not a
He did?
Carney.
Yeah, he did. He did the Bank of Canada, but he also led the
Bank of
Bank,
England. Yep.
Bank of England after Brexit.
that. After
Um,
from 2013 to 2020. So some of their most turbulent times.
This guy's battle tested, and if you're, we can see on this chart here as the dips happen. These are dates that correlate with the announcements of tariffs being put on. So, he would put on a tariff and cause the conservatives to sink. He would take it off. They would stabilize for a moment. Then they put it back on and they stabilize for a second. And they've just sunk to this 38%. And this has been at the benefit of the Liberal Party to an extent, but really to the detriment of the NDP party. They are getting hammered.
It's a fascinating analysis because if you look at it, you can see that it's not really that the conservatives, if it were just conservatives flipping over to liberals, the conservatives would still have a pretty significant lead. It's all the other parties essentially abandoning their parties, and especially NDP, but coming over to support the Liberal Party.
You done with NDP?
Yeah, this some of the abandonment. We can't blame the tariffs for 100% for the abandonment of the NDP. There is some Jagmeet Singh fatigue going on. He's been the leader for a decade, and some people think it's time for a change. I think this is probably if those polling numbers hold up and they really do lose that many seats or even potentially official status in Parliament, then his days as leader are over. I'm a little surprised after 2021 that they weren't over, but this drop is just crazy. But also part of the reason that if you look, Bloc has also dropped relatively significantly when Quebec was seen as somewhat safe for them. And that's the only province they run in, of course. But a lot of those seats. I'm sorry.
We can go up to the polling by province. So
yeah, and you can see for the Liberals, if they were going to win a majority or even a coalition government, they had to make some serious inroads in Quebec. So they're dedicating a lot of time and energy into Quebec, which is, as I'm sure we're going to get to talking about the debates that are coming up this week, is a little bit of a challenge for the Liberals, but Quebec seems to not mind. So this is really kind of hurting Bloc almost as much as it's hurting the NDP. In 2011, when the NDP became the official minority, the official opposition, and actually beat the Liberals that year down to third, it was Quebec that was the key for them. Now for the Conservatives, the key is not Quebec. It's definitely Ontario, where they need to make inroads, and they've got a long way to go.
Yeah, the Liberals are almost at 50% in Ontario, which the province is run by
it's like the United States. It's cities versus rural.
Well,
Ontario contains Toronto, the fourth.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah, certainly Toronto is dominant, and that's where ridings are.
Yeah,
Toronto, and that is largely a Liberal and strong.
Right, and I read that taking out Toronto out of Ontario, the Conservatives have a 20% lead over the Liberals, not counting Toronto.
Yeah, if I'm assuming this is I can't really read it, but I'm assuming this is 338 Canada that you've got up here, David. They do have a pretty good.
This is actually the CBC poll.
There are some pretty good maps.
This is CBC's polling.
There, okay. There are some pretty good
I'll take
maps.
The,
that-
the other interesting thing
Go on.
I'll say is that people are looking up at the thing, they see Alberta. Alberta, just think Texas. Alberta is Canada's Texas.
It's where Ted Cruz is from.
Not tell people in
They have
Alberta that.
oil,
Here, I think this is a
cowboys,
good time to show this.
everything they want. The Flames, right? Exactly. They've never won a Stanley Cup. No, actually, Texas has won a Stanley Cup in recent memory. But other than that,
Alberta, Alberta's got a few.
Yeah,
oh no,
yes, they do.
I'm saying in our lifetime. And actually, that's not true. Calgary's won in our lifetime. And Edmonton won a bunch.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Just not
Yeah.
Toronto. But no, in all seriousness, there again, if you want to keep going with that Texas analogy, which by the way, Albertans hate,
Oh, yeah.
they don't like it. They really don't. They use it. They just don't like anybody else using it. But they've got their Austin as well. You know, much like Austin is a liberal stronghold in a very conservative state. Edmonton is a liberal stronghold in a very conservative province. And there are a couple of ridings. There's a riding in Calgary that's also liberal, but in general, you're right. Most of it is a very conservative
oil
province.
country.
There again, it is. I love Canadian oil and gas. That is very much a province that is dominated by two cities, Edmonton and Calgary, and then a whole bunch of empty land.
Yeah.
So
you know, this is a good map, and it shows you what the woes of the Conservative Party are going into this election, because it looks like they're going to get shut out in Newfoundland, probably a lot of Atlantic Canada, maybe a couple of seats here in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. But, you know, once you get to Ontario is probably going to tell you how early of the night this is going to be when we get to the election, once those ridings start closing. But if this map is anywhere accurate, you see it's going to be 194 to hold a parliamentary majority in the Canadian Parliament. That requires 172 seats.
correct.
And so they'll be well over a majority in the Parliament. The other issue that has driven the fortunes, not just tariffs, but the implicit threat of the Trump administration to essentially take over Canada as a state, where they've continually called the prime minister the governor of Canada. And, you know, it has raised, you know, I follow a couple of Canadian broadcasters on YouTube. One is JJ McCullough, who's a very center right podcaster on YouTube, and he talks about the Canada being one of the most nationalistic countries there are. The pride in being Canadian, the you know, we've heard this throughout the campaign, the elbows up analogy, that, you know, they're going to protect themselves. And people who think that, you know, we just run, like, militarily, yes, we probably could take Canada, but it's going to end up being like Afghanistan, and it's going to be like Vietnam. We won't be able to hold it.
So,
And why would you?
Yeah,
I will say we don't have a great track record on taking Canada. We got all the way to Hamilton, and they pushed us all the way back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
and in the Northeast, there actually have been armed conflicts in recent memory over fishing rights. And you know, the United States claims that our fishing rights extend 200 miles into areas that the Canadians also claim as their sovereign waters.
Yeah.
And at various points in time, both naval ships and Coast Guard ships have intercepted other fishing vessels, and it gets awkward. But you know, really, the idea of a military conflict, you know, since 1776, or rather since 1812,
1814.
Yeah, there hasn't been conflict between two English-speaking nations. It doesn't seem like we're likely to start anytime soon. And I think what's interesting about it is, the Canadian Act of Union and their constitution, the acts of constitution, uh, aren't really uh, as strong and binding uh, because of one province that's been trying to break away for a long time, right? Quebec has been hammering away and hammering away. They want to be their own country. They speak a different language. Montreal is the second largest French-speaking city in the world, and they really don't want to be part of the United States.
So much
Now,
that
what's
the
interesting
roads
about
going
that,
into
Um,
Quebec are awful.
huh?
so
So much
so
that the
I
roads going into Quebec from Vermont are awful.
they're pretty bad. I agree. So
I don't know.
Dan, I will say though that this election and some of Trump's threats have
Yeah.
had a kind of an interesting impact on Quebec, and about 50% of Quebecers have traditionally been separatists, and the other 50% have other feelings. But what Trump's threats have really done are turn Quebecers into Canadians. It's really he's done a great job at unifying a country. He just didn't unify his own.
Yeah.
It's so that separatist movement in Quebec is
Well,
not as strong
so
as it once was. Partly,
what's interesting about it is I've been thinking what he should do is go after Nunavut, which is the northernmost Canadian province.
He will get
And
none of it.
well, what's interesting about it is, it's very, very close to Greenland. Saying none of it
Come on,
is
that was good.
terrible. That's a terrible.
That was good.
It was pretty good.
I mean,
But it's interesting. It's the least populated province, and it's filled with all sorts of resources.
Is it the least popular? Well, I mean, I guess Northwest
It-
Territories has Yellowknife
it's not a province; it's a territory.
territory.
Oh,
yeah.
it's not a province.
It's
No.
not a province.
None of
One
it,
province, three
Northwest
territories.
and Yukon.
Interesting. I knew they had a one elected representative and one senator, but so I guess that's why, because the provinces have two senators.
Yep, they get representation in Parliament, and representation at the national at both the Scotties Tournament of Hearts and the Briar, which are the women's and men's curling championships.
Well, that is very important.
Yes, that is. Important.
Yes, it is. But no, they're territories. 10 provinces, 3 territories. But you're right.
Tournament of Hearts is must view.
Well, one of the other fascinating things about Nunavut is that you can't drive there. I don't care where you are right now. You cannot drive there.
Correct.
In fact, recently, I was looking to see what is the farthest north that I can drive east of the Mississippi. And the answer is Happy Valley, Goose Bay in Labrador. And you have to drive the Trans-Labrador Highway to get there.
That's crazy.
If people are looking for an adventure, they should look up the Trans-Labrador Highway. Brutal in the winter, brutal in the summer.
So yeah, usually none of it is a NDP stronghold. So that kind of tells you how badly the NDP's fallen off.
Right.
That it is tentatively in the liberal camp. But yeah, this election, Trump really shot himself in the foot. When you think about this election, he could have had a very friendly, compliant government with the conservatives in power, with a pretty sizable majority. And he really just pushed Canada into essentially, I never think of Canada as an enemy, but it's going to be a very hostile government to what Trump wants, which kind of I'm okay with that. Like I'm not rooting for Mark Carney because I'm all big on Canadian healthcare or big on um, you know their policies or platforms or anything. It's the fact that I'm okay with a government that is not willing, that is going to be very willing to stand up to Donald Trump, and a person who has the economic chops to really take on the Trump administration to really counter what we're seeing with the tariffs and all the economic machinations that the Trump administration are trying to do with this country.
I mean, look, if you look at the election slogans of the conservatives and the liberals, the conservatives have gone with Canada first,
Yeah,
which is which
tone deaf.
sounds familiar. Haven't heard that. Haven't heard that. And the liberals have gone with Canada strong, which is resonating. Which is resonating with Canadians.
And they've
you know,
they've done the elbows up too. They've really leaned into that idea. Of course, people who are watching that are not big hockey fans, the idea of elbows up, you keep your elbows up to deliver tough messages when you need to when you're skating around the ice. And that's exactly what they're leaning into. Mike Myers has been a big kind of opening salvo of this election season, where he appeared with Mark Carney on a very well done ad. I thought it was pretty awesome. But yeah, they're definitely leaning into that elbows up mantra.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and I mean, Mark Carney really gets it, and it's not surprising that Mike Myers is supporting the Liberals. He's been a long time supporter of the Liberals. He very famously during the 2015 federal election, he very famously went on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Back then, the rules of Canadian politics were that if you were a non-Canadian, you couldn't tell a Canadian how to vote. You couldn't campaign. So rather than do that, John Oliver brought on Mike Myers to deliver the message, and he delivered a very pro-liberal message, which I doubt it really made a huge difference in Canada. That was 10 years of Stephen Harper was enough.
Yeah.
And Canadians were ready to move on from that. And at that point, Trudeau was very was
He's
popular.
dreamy.
Yeah.
Yes. He's dreaming. He's had a rough couple of years here. Between the pandemic, which
and you getting divorced or got
divorced?
Yes.
I mean, generally, what people say now when they talk,
he's on the market, ladies.
Trudeau is, why are the pretty ones always so stupid?
Well, and this.
There was a moment where he really marshaled everything. Like, it seemed like he was going to be the guy who was going to bring Canada to a different sense of order, a different sense of unity. Because Canada, like we said earlier, Canada's experienced the same divide the United States is: cities versus rural. And Ontario being so enormous, it just, it has a very dramatic effect on the rest of the politics. Ontario, Vancouver, we talked about the disparity between Edmonton and Calgary, but, even Montreal. Montreal is, obviously they want to be free, but generally they're a big city like everybody else. They're big into municipal powers and taxes that support a strong public works. The last big snowstorm that I experienced when I was in Boston, the city got hit up pretty bad. We ended up, Montreal sent us some snow removal equipment, and Boston has got a ton of snow removal equipment. So it was pretty
But have you
impressive.
ever watched Canadians do snow removal?
Yeah, I mean, they're awesome at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, you
I
know,
mean, and Dave the same
having
guy.
lived in Atlanta, I know bad snow removal. I can tell you about bad snow removal.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
they sent us a machine that the problem was that we had had 6 weeks of snow and it never got above freezing, so nothing melted. So everybody was out there with a snow blower. We had, piles
dibs.
5 to 6 feet high, and the roads, if you have shovels, they essentially keep getting narrow and narrow and narrower. But the Canadians have these awesome machines that they don't care. They drive through those giant snowbanks and they just throw the snow 50 feet into your yard.
Well, now they like have a tandem thing where the blower blows it into like a dump truck
Right, right.
and it
That's
just
what they
like
do in
takes
the
it
city.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's very well organized as well. I mean, the city is amazing. We don't know Daryl, but
Daryl, I want to
encourage you
say
to report
it's
that
like
back to us.
20, less than 20.
They usually run about 20, but I can
Yeah.
find out for you pretty quickly.
Yeah. So Craig said that there was a governor of Maine that declared war. This is actually a very interesting thing. It's the Aroostook War,
Yep.
also called the Pork and Beans War. Governor Dunlop in 1838
Pork.
to settle the northern
Wow.
border of Maine. So
Maine was just a state
yeah,
because Maine was originally part of Massachusetts.
that's right. So no, this election is going to be very interesting going beyond the election because how it's going to basically rejuvenate the Liberal Party. Now, do I think in a couple of years when things calm down between the United States and Canada that they'll finally have the conservative resurgence? I do think so. I think, uh, given a lack of external factors, I think the people of Canada are ready to move on from the Liberal Party. But I think in this heightened state where they're worried, 16 candidates for the Liberal Party or Libertarian Party of Canada this time around.
You know,
Um,
for a long time, I really believed that Donald Trump was part of a Democratic conspiracy to be so bad that he would guarantee a Democratic majority when Hillary Clinton was running.
yeah, but
Because,
we've got the Democrats, and the Democrats gonna fuck that shit up.
exactly. I mean, and who's the largest single donor to Hillary Clinton's campaign? It's Donald Trump. Not her presidential campaign, but her Senate
Senate
campaign.
campaigns.
And here it is again. We see sort of the reaction to Donald Trump is worldwide liberalism. And so, if they were doing it, I mean, the consequences are terrible. But I do think that you're seeing. I don't know. I'm not as convinced as you are that that conservatism is going to come back because I think and remember that the Canadians uh, they have all these different acts that add up to be a constitution. Um, but they do have hate speech laws, right? They have other things that are the sort of things that you could see liberals in America wishing that they'd had to shut down uh, a Joe Rogan or a Steve Bannon or something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, there's also Canadian content laws that
Yep.
really, like getting news. Um, I think it's C-16 law or something like that, where Canadian content is so overly regulated for podcasters and performers that uh, it really puts a strain on information coming from Canada. Canada is not a way I use the term liberal fantasy. It is not libertarian or liberal, classical liberal by any stretch of the imagination. There are, uh, it's got a very strong social. I won't use the term socialist, but it's a very social welfare background.
Yeah.
It's like the social welfare democracies of Northern Europe.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not surprising. You know, I think what's surprising is how unaware most Americans are of how the rest of the world is. We are the outlier, not everybody
We are.
else. Uh, Tony, you're going to say something there. I can see it.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the two things I've noticed are one, that Americans tend to paint the rest of the world with an American paintbrush. Like I said earlier, people like to think of the conservatives and the liberals as the Republicans and the Democrats, and there's just not the analog. And also they look at the quote unquote socialized healthcare in Canada actually is for Canadians, or they have private insurance in Canada, for the record.
Yeah.
And two, seeing that and going, socialized healthcare, they're socialist. And it's just painting it with that broad brush. And it's something that is a tendency of Americans. I've seen in this election people getting a little bit more interested than I have in any. And when I say people, I mean Americans, be getting more interested in what's happening in the Canadian election than I have in any elections prior.
Because I think a lot of Americans are seeing what's going on, and you know, I, I will say that we have, people can make the case for Great Britain. We've had no better ally than Canada. Canada's trudged off to us, except for Vietnam, has trudged off to us in most of our foreign engagements.
You could make an argument that Canada was a great ally to us during Vietnam.
They were.
They were not an ally to the American government, but they were an ally to the American people.
The people, yes. But what has happened since Trump has taken power the second time has a lot of people worried. Like, that was the great thing about being uh, being on the North American continent, is that you are isolated from all the foibles of Europe and Asia, and you had a friendly nation to the north of you and a mostly friendly nation to the south of you, and you really didn't have to worry about invasions and things like that and the tides of war. And it's kind of flipped, in that we are now in a situation where uh, we don't know what this administration is going to do with our really good friends to the north, and we've got so many linkages between the United States and Canada that it boggles the mind that the relationship between the governments, and I won't say between the people, between the governments, has deteriorated so much.
I mean, it certainly has caused some relationship to deteriorate between the people, especially people who primarily voted for Trump and still don't have their eyes open yet. But even looking at it from a trade standpoint, trade with Canada is more hostile and more difficult now than it was even 2 months ago.
Oh yeah,
and they're our biggest trade partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not just our biggest trading partner, but the trade between the United States and Canada is the largest international trade between any two countries in all the world, more than between China and Japan or anybody else you care to mention. The United States and Canada are the most prolific and profitable trading partners in the world. And here we are in this situation where, it's, the consequences of what's happening, right? I've been using a phrase recently. People talk a lot about Pax Americana, but there's also been Prospero Americana, American prosperity that the rest of the world has participated in, that was spearheaded by the United States and by capitalism. A rising tide lifts all boats, and people can certainly say, sure, the Chinese, are really coming on as an economic power, and the Germans and the Japanese, all that stuff was built by the American economy. And here we are in a situation where what Trump has done is asked the rest of the world to not trade with us anymore.
Yeah.
To find a way to trade amongst themselves. And you're starting to see the very beginning of that. It's one of the really interesting things about it, right? Canada and Great Britain were traditional partners anyway because of the Commonwealth. But now they're starting to explore other aspects of trading. Canada and Russia are actually closer to each other than people realize. And there's talk about, what can we trade back and forth? And although American farmers grow a tremendous amount of wheat, the Canadians aren't slouches, especially considering the climate that they're dealing with. And as summers get warmer, the Canadians are going to get even better and better at producing things. While what we're seeing happening right now, this is a huge situation, right? American farmers right now should be planting soybeans, and they can't because they don't know if the Chinese, who buy most of the soybean purchase, are going to be able to afford American things. And so you're potentially talking about enormous fields in the United States going fallow. And I'm glad that I got to use that word in a sentence
Yes.
because of these crazy, crazy tariffs, our relationship with the world. And the saddest thing about it is that Canada has been our neighbor to the north. We have a relationship with them. We've had a relationship with them over the years. One of the greatest stories I can tell you is that every year in Boston, a Christmas tree is raised, and it comes from Newfoundland because almost 100 years ago, actually, I think it's over 100 years ago now, because it's during World War One, an ammunition ship and a fuel tanker combined in Newfoundland and St. John's and exploded. The explosion was so bad that it
They
broke
saw it
windows.
in Boston.
Huh?
They saw it in Boston, like the
Well,
light, the sky lit up.
it broke windows in Boston as well.
Wow.
Uh, and the Bostonians, first argued about directions. What's the best way to get to? Because that's what you do in Boston. But then they immediately set out. They didn't know
Don't drive.
anything was wrong, but they packed up caravans and they went to Newfoundland. And when they got there, they were able to render aid. And every year, when the Bruins are in the playoffs, the people from Newfoundland root for the Bruins over Les Habitants, the Bruins' mortal enemies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's part of a long list of things that between our two countries we've done for one another. I mean, you think of September 11th and when
Yep.
they shut down air traffic and these transatlantic flights had to land somewhere, but they couldn't land in the United States. They landed in Atlantic Canada. They landed, and there were the people on board those planes were given shelter and they were given clothes and food and all the good stuff. And when California was burning this winter,
Exactly.
the Canadians lent us their big firefighting
Because the
tanker
Canadians,
airplanes.
right? The Canadians just dealt with the second largest wildfire in the world, in
Yeah,
the history of the world, as far as our recorded history. And so they had this plane that was just amazing, and they sent it down,
yeah.
right? Because we
While
had,
Donald Trump is talking shit.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
and here we are, and so it's interesting, here we are in the situation. I don't think it really matters. I mean, it matters a little bit who gets elected, but the most important thing that's going to happen in Canada is Canadian unity.
yeah,
Right? If it were a conservative elected, if were a liberal elected, they're all going to say, well, we love Canada. And the Canadians love their country the way Americans used to. And that's what we've lost, right?
yeah.
We have lost that now. We used to say America, love it or leave it. Or we didn't say that, but a bunch of small-minded dickheads said it. But now we're in a situation where you say America, love it.
If my
Well,
guy's in charge,
yeah,
love it
exactly.
if my guy's in charge. Yeah.
Right. And maybe, maybe Canada does us a big favor by modeling what it's like to be a unified nation with political differences.
Well,
Maybe
you
that's
know,
the best thing that can come out of
it'd
that.
be nice to have a country model the idea that we can be neighborly with one another. Like that, I think that's the lesson that we need to learn, that our government needs to learn. I think the people, especially along the Canadian border, know that, but
Right.
our government is just,
One of
I
the
don't know.
fundamental premises of libertarianism is that two people don't engage in a trade unless it's voluntary and unless it benefits them both. And
Yeah.
there is no question that, there are places around the world in which there were unfair tariffs being assessed against the United States, either protectionist tariffs or other things. But all the people who chose to still sell things did. The United States economy uh, surpassed all of those issues. It's an interesting question because there is an argument to be made, and I mean, I'm a free market guy, but there's an argument to be made against monopolies.
Yeah, it's a
One of
shitty
the,
game.
huh?
It's a shitty
It's
game.
a terrible game. Terrible game. My people, by the way, have a genetic advantage at playing Monopoly. But
Jeez.
let me just say that Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations says, two people of the same trade seldom meet, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public. He's warning about the power of monopolies. And the United States has used monopoly power in the past to disadvantage other countries, and other companies. And a great example of that, probably the greatest example of that, uh, in recent memory, is Microsoft. Right? Microsoft has owned the desktop, not just in the United States, but especially around the world. And we haven't used that power aggressively, but lots of countries wonder why they don't have a computer industry. They're like, we're just as smart. Why don't we have a computer industry? Why isn't there an English operating system? Why isn't there a French operating system? There certainly could be. And the reason why is because of American monopoly power. And so computers, who cares, right? Microsoft wants to have, own the space. That's okay. But if you're talking about food, you don't want America to own the food industry.
You
You
don't
don't
want a
want,
single owner of the food industry because you leave yourself open to
yeah,
drought, pestilence, whatever. Like,
yeah. Same thing for cars or televisions or all sorts of things. When the American economy really started cranking right after World War II, we made everything. We sold everything. Over time, other countries brought their industry to bear, made some differences, made some protectionist decisions. It didn't certainly, and I like that I'm going to get to use this word in the appropriate sense. It did not retard the American economy. It did not slow our growth.
no.
Uh, so here we are, with Donald Trump in this situation where he's saying, not only are we going to America first, even though the rest of the world has been putting America first. If you look at the fact that our economy outperforms everybody else's, and our capacity for production cannot be met by the American consumer.
No.
And yet, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going with this rant.
Well,
But
so
I mean,
Tony, let's talk. So 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks and a day from now, how bad does it get for the conservatives?
So, I mean, the one thing I will say is right now the polling doesn't look good for the Conservatives. It looks like the Liberals are going to win a pretty sizable majority government. However, one thing that you'll find is that we've seen polling like this in the past, and the most noteworthy example I can point to is the 2011 federal election, where you had her who was the incumbent prime minister, who had a coalition government, who ended up asking the governor general to dissolve parliament and called the snap election. And then Michael Ignatieff on the liberal side. And if you look at the polling, it was going to be a landslide for the Liberals. And what happened is that the Liberals came in third.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives majority government. Polling in Canada, sometimes in the U.S. too, we see this tends to underrepresent conservative voters. So I do think we're going to look at, I think we're going to see a liberal victory. I think it'll be a coalition government, not a majority government. I don't think they'll get there.
Oh, wow.
And
That's interesting.
And some of the ridings that they're calling as safe,
Tony, your mic is cutting in and out. No worries.
Network connect. No, I think some of the ridings that I think they're going to go to blocker to NDP, much like we saw in 2011. I do think they're going to hold most of Ontario, but I think you're looking at a liberal MP count in the 160s.
Okay.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. So, who do you think is the best partner then for the Liberals? Is there going to be let's just say hypothetically 160? They need 12 seats.
If they need 12 seats, the first place there's two ways they could go with that, and neither one of them is a particular party. I think probably their best partner is going to be Bloc. You've got they're going to have they're going to have their safe 30 seats. You're going to have enough to get over that 172 mark. The other possible coalition partner,
depending on how many they get,
how well they do are going to be a combination. I don't think either one of them is going to get enough to get them over the hump by themselves. I the ones that make the difference.
I don't foresee a grand coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberals. I mean, it's possible, but it's not very, very likely at all.
It is highly unlikely. It's likely that the Conservatives are still going to be a huge upset if they weren't. And I think they will be. I think they will be the official opposition. So they're not going to give that up.
No.
This is going to be, I think, years. It's not 20. I think we're going to see a snap election in a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, I think once the Trump threat is alleviated, that the intensity is not going to be there to maintain I mean, I think the Canada has been pushed to the Liberals, but also Canadian parties have been remarkably resilient in reinventing themselves between elections. So the Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney is not the Conservative Party of Pierre Poilievre, or even Stephen Harper. So I think we can, a few years you could probably see a resurgence of the Conservative Party. I don't know that Pierre Poilievre survives this, but we'll see what happens with the election. But I actually do think the Liberal Party will get to a majority, but probably not as much as say the 338 saying with 194 seats. I'm thinking somewhere in the we lost Tony again. Somewhere in the 180, low 180s, maybe even high 170s for a narrow majority. But Daryl asked, would the NDP join a coalition government? It's not unheard of for the NDP to, but again, you don't have to have the NDP
What's interesting about
officially
it is
join.
if you think about who is the biggest enemy of the Liberal Party, it's not the Conservatives, it's NDP because NDP takes people away from the Liberal Party, or they
Sure.
have traditionally. We go back and we looked at that original graph, you would see that uh, Liberals' gain happened on behalf of the NDP. And so,
Yeah.
on the one
Most
hand,
of it, yeah.
you might think that that would say, okay, well, the Liberals then, they should recognize that their growth is coming out of NDP members. On the other hand, the Liberals probably don't want to form a coalition with NDP because so many of the people who are voting for them are actually NDP members. You see that a lot in a parliamentary system where you don't want to make an alliance with your closest rival if you don't have to.
Trudeau really pushed the idea of changing from first past, just like American elections, just like the British parliamentary system. They exist with a first past the post voting system. So, whoever gets the most votes in the election will win. You don't have to have a majority of votes, just a plurality. Trudeau did try and look at the idea of switching to a ranked choice voting system. That died fairly quickly. But it was born out of a couple of elections ago where the Harper was able to maintain a majority because the Liberals and the NDP really split the vote between each other and allowed the Conservatives to take a few more ridings that probably would have gone to if the left wing and we're going to say that the NDP is far more left wing than the Liberals, but if the left had united behind a candidate, the left wing
Right.
would have won that riding. But in a way that the parliamentary system works, the and first past the post works. Seat with the party with the most votes gets the
Well,
seat.
it's very difficult to do something like that in a parliamentary style election, right? It's very difficult for Labor or Liberals to raise a candidate in a place that NDP traditionally holds because you're not running against a conservative. You have to convince the NDP candidate to not run
Yeah.
in a race that they know they could win. So it's very difficult in a parliamentary style election to get people to say, "Oh, we're going to do this thing." It happened in this case because of the great unifier, Donald Trump.
I mean, to the point, and I apologize for dropping out again.
No, you're
All
good.
the kids
You're good.
decided to jump on YouTube at the same time. The NDP actually did have a vote of confidence in Justin Trudeau for a while in 2024, supporting his minority government. And it was in their best interest because they wanted to get some of their policies in place. And that's the reason why the NDP would form a coalition with anybody else. But Dan, to your point, I don't know that it's necessarily in the Liberals' best interest to do that this time, which is why I think Bloc is probably their best bet.
Yeah, and I mean, I really do think that they are thinking ahead now, having been on the cusp of having, had a historical loss, and now sort of, clutching victory from the jaws of defeat. There are going to be a lot of people who are thinking about how do we never get in that position again? What do we do to, really ruin NDP so that
I
we're
think the
seen as
only way you see a grand coalition or anything like that is if the United States declares war on Canada, like an
there is a
actual
movie about that. Actually, there's more than one movie about
Canadian bacon. Yeah.
Well, no, that's not the good one.
South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
South Park,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Canadian Bacon was pretty good though. I like that movie.
Canadian Bacon's not bad. And
Because I think all the Canadians in the movie were quote unquote the American side, and all the Americans in that movie were Canadians.
played by Canadians.
Yeah.
I did not realize that aspect of it. It is, yeah. I don't know. I often think that things can't get crazier. I hope that there's not an impending conflict between the two largest trading countries in the world. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Dan, what do you? Oh, Strange Brew is good. Another great Canadian movie. There's so much good content that comes from Canada.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You know, whether it's Trailer Park Boys, Letterkenny.
Well, let me suggest something that you guys may not have been watching. Last One Laughing. Netflix has put a series out, and it's in all the English-speaking countries except for the United States. They get a bunch of comedians together in a room, 6 hours, and the last person who laughs. When you laugh, once you get a yellow card, second time red card, and then you're removed from the room. And so the Canadian one, I just finished watching the British one, and it's been fantastic. I don't want to really tell you that. Started watching the Canadian one. In addition to some Canadian comics I never heard of, Carolyn Ray is in there. Tom Green, a real blast from the past. And then, of course, the grandfather, Dave Foley, who looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to watching that one as well. There's so much good content that comes from Canada. Stargate, SG1.
Second City TV. Well, I mean, because most of those guys were Canadian.
Yep.
The Kids in the Hall.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Should we do 5 minutes of general news before we go to the quiz?
Yeah, Tony, we'll do that. Tony,
I was just going to throw out Corner Gas,
Schitt's Creek.
I think we've mentioned Trailer Park Boys and Letterkenny. And on Friday, Netflix, there was a series that premiered on Netflix called North of North, which really focuses on the northern experience in Canada. It's kind of a sitcom that premiered on the CBC in March, and Netflix is now distributing worldwide, and it's really pretty interesting and gives a different perspective on the First Nations experience, especially in cold weather.
Daryl puts up talking about Dave Foley. One of my favorite shows of all time was the final Kids in the Hall.
Yep.
And they went to like a segment of stuff that the censors banned. And they're like, this one is called Hitler blanks a donkey, and it's essentially Hitler a donkey. Like, yes, that's awesome. But
50 Helens agree.
What's that?
50 Helens agree.
50 Helens agree. Yes.
One of my favorite recurring sketches on
that,
and of course, I'm crushing your head. I'm crushing your head.
Manservant Hecubus and God, what was the other guy's name? They did like a spoof on horror movies, like the intro to horror movies. It was hilarious. But let's talk about general news.
I'm interested to hear what's going to happen with this the arson attack on Josh Shapiro's house.
Pennsylvania's governor's house was hit by an arson attack. In fact, the guy that they arrested, his social media, like if you're going to do something like this, you don't put this stuff on social media. He put a lot of he had like this crocheted thing like of a Molotov cocktail saying "Be the light you want to see in the world."
Yeah,
probably not something you want to do if you're going to go do that.
It's interesting that we don't, although we know that part, we don't really know the whole motivation yet. I am interested to hearing.
He's pretty right. At least the posts that he's put up are pretty right wing.
Do we
Well,
have an
but is
Indian guy?
is it right wing politically? Is it
I got a name. Hold
anti-Semitic?
on a second.
It's going to be interesting.
Hold on.
I mean,
We're talking
Shapiro's
about
the
this
prime,
one.
right? So
Cody Balmer is the guy that was arrested. Let's see, January 15th, 2021. Biden supporters shouldn't exist. Where were you? Where were you? His first run, we're aware of the trash that he is. As for the second, still knew what scum he is. Now, why did y'all forget? Because he did. Uh, Terribly well written. Sluts with kids need to get it through their simple brain that your trash pussy isn't what keeps us in y'all's kids' lives. Oh, he's a
the,
lovely person.
so
Um,
there is. I saw too a rumor that he lost a property through eminent domain. Uh, and well, it's not clear now. I'm looking at it whether it's eminent domain or sheriff's sale in violation of unpaid taxes. But
yeah, he sounds lovely.
yeah, he's clearly a jerk.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering which one is which. What is he going to be? Is he going to be politically motivated? Is he going to be anti-Semitic, or is it going to be pro-Trump?
Oh my God. Yeah. I hope not, Tony.
Well, let's find out. It would be
Yeah.
interesting to see. You know, there's a PAC I'm going to look up right now on the FEC site to see if there's any donors in there.
Donations from this gentleman.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other interesting things worldwide. Obviously, there's the tariffs and
Yeah, so tariffs were on until later this week, and then they decided to put a 90-day pause. And the interesting thing is that Donald Trump goes on Pravda Social and says, now's a great time to buy,
yeah.
and then does the 90-day, which, yikes, market manipulation, hello. And then just yesterday, he exempts smartphones, chips, things like that. He was recently hosted a bunch of the tech guys, Zuckerberg, and all those folks down at Mar-a-Lago, who lobbied him to pull off some of these tariffs, and so the tech industry isn't going to be hit as hard. So the Nasdaq probably won't go down as much when the next time he throws on these tariffs. But we got a 90-day reprieve on most of these tariffs. I think he's keeping in place the blanket 10%.
Yeah, it's interesting because the iPhone one is really only the beginning. So people who don't know, iPhone has 53% of the market in the United States, but only about 20% of the market worldwide outside of the United States. And adding these extra tariffs would drop the Apple share significantly lower. So I don't know that Apple made whatever deal they made where they're going to
Oh,
build
yeah,
a
they were
$500 million.
they probably bought a bunch of Trump coin,
Yeah, exactly.
that type of stuff.
It's going to
You
be
know,
something like that, right? Because they got plenty of cash lying around, so why not?
yeah. I mean, that's the best way to lobby the president at this point is to
Yep,
buy his
yep,
coin.
yep, yep.
And
As Putin said, if I wanted to influence American elections or American politics, I would just give money to the Clinton Foundation.
yeah, but
It's,
he's giving it to essentially the whatever Trump is doing.
which let me point out goes to something that all people should think about: how stupid campaign finance laws are. Campaign finance laws don't stop rich people from giving money to candidates or
No,
influencing elections. They only stop you. And I mean,
well, it's just like gun control laws.
Exactly.
Gun control is never going to stop
Yep.
criminals from using guns. It's just going to stop you from owning a gun.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Everything else. So,
all
and I
right, y'all
guess
ready
that's about
for
it. The NHL season
quiz
is
time?
ending.
Oh yeah.
Commercial
So
fun.
Tony, you are a NHL fan. Your Calgary Flames are holding on for dear life in the playoff chase. They are
Dear life.
for dear life. They're like what 3 points out of the second wild card.
I believe they're 3
Behind
points.
St. Louis.
Yep.
Yeah. So St. Louis is, they got really hot, won like 13 games in a row. Now they've lost a couple games in a row, so there's still chance. There's still chance for, I believe, there's still chance for the Columbus Blue Jackets in the East, but pretty much everybody else is set. What are your predictions for the Stanley Cup? Is it going to finally come home to Canada?
I think there's no doubt it comes home. I mean, until the time that they are eliminated, I gotta say Calgary. But in all honesty, Winnipeg's strong.
Jets are great this year.
Yeah.
Maple Leafs are strong. Edmonton's
got Connor McJesus, so I mean, there's always a chance for them.
There's always chance. So I think you've got a few good opportunities to get the cup back to Canada. It's just it can go anywhere. I'd love to see it go back to Canada as long as it doesn't go to Raleigh. I'm happy.
Well, I mean, you're talking, let's say Calgary makes the playoffs and Montreal holds on. You've got what, 6 out of the 7 Canadian teams making the playoffs. The only team out of the running are the Vancouver Canucks, which is a little bit surprising. I thought they started out the season well, but they really faded off towards the end of the year. They've got so many controversies about who's going to remain on the team after next year or after this offseason.
Who are you going to be rooting for, Dave?
Whew. I mean, it's hard, 14 years outside the playoffs. It's, and I've celebrated because it's what 32 years since Canadian, or 33 years since the Canadian team has won won the Stanley Cup. The Montreal Canadiens in 1990. That's 1993 was last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup. And I've celebrated, I call it Operation Leaf Blower, to get all the Canadian teams out of the playoffs. I'm actually rooting for, except for the Maple Leafs. I will never root for the Maple Leafs.
Understood.
That's a bridge too far for me.
I get it.
Fucking Ty Domi. That guy can. Sorry.
I have a friend who's a Maple Leaf season ticket holder, and her seats are right next to Ty Domi's. So
really,
wow.
So, anyway,
I mean,
Ty Domi actually caused a.
I hope she always punches him from behind.
No, apparently he's quite pleasant.
Yeah, no, there was a great, if you get a chance to, the Sabres did a great retrospective on the battles between Rob Ray and Ty Domi.
Yeah.
They fought like 12 times or something like that in their careers, and just the respect those two dudes have for one another. And both guys, I mean, I met Rob Ray a few back when Atlanta still had a team. They had the All-Star game. I met Rob Ray at an alumni wine event during the All-Star weekend, and absolute salt of the earth dude. Just you wouldn't, I mean, outside of the scars on his face, you would never have realized that this guy punched people in the face for a living. And I've heard the same thing about Ty Domi. Ty Domi actually caused some political controversy in Canada when he shacked up with, I believe she was the foreign minister at the time, Belinda Stronach.
Interesting.
Who was dating another member of the Canadian government, Peter MacKay, at the time. So it caused a little bit of controversy in Canadian politics. But yeah. All right. So you all ready for Le Quiz?
I'm ready for the quiz. I just have to mention my one other hockey
right.
thing. Back when I ran a sports website, we had George LaRock on. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Oh, God, I love George LaRock.
It was so fascinating to talk to him because we talked about the fact that, in Quebec Junior League, he was the highest scorer one year. So this guy looks like he has all the potential in the world. And then he gets to the NHL and all he can do is, I mean, he wasn't bad, but he was an enforcer.
Yeah.
And, we asked him, like, what was that like? He's like, coach tells you at one point in time, he's like, maybe you're not going to get a goal on this play, but maybe there are other things you can do that'll make your teammates respect you.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. All right, let's watch this quiz.
Jordan Rock was in the movie Goon.
Was he in Goon?
He was in Goon. He was
I did not realize that.
first minor league fight that minor league fight against Liev Schreiber. Said he looked like Stevie Wonder had done his braids or something like that, which just triggered the fight. But all right, so 5 things news quiz that came from Friday, April 11th. So things that have happened this weekend are not on the quiz. It says a championship game, a silent killer, not my farts, the world's best airport, and what do you remember from the week that was? So we see flooding, we see the United States Naval Academy. And
that's in Annapolis.
It is in Annapolis, and looks like a nice little fall.
Botanical garden of some sort. Oh, there we go.
And that's the first question. What country is home to the world's best airport, according to a recent survey from Skytrax? Qatar, France, Singapore, or U.S.?
No, it's not going to be the U.S.
No. Although the best airport, the most liked airport in the United States was Atlanta, I believe.
No fucking
Yeah,
way.
I mean, it was hard for me to believe, but I was like, Atlanta, really? Have you ever been on the plane train, man?
That place is a fucking disaster. Like for me, my favorite American airport is Long Beach, because
so there's so much drama.
You get off the plane onto the tarmac and then walk right into the. It's a big open air airport.
My favorite. I haven't been to the new one, but the Kansas City airport was so nice because like you landed, you're wherever you landed, the belt for your bags was like just on the other side of the wall. Like it was so efficient to go from front door to the jetway. I believe the new one's a little bit different, but
loved the Kansas City airport.
I'm gonna guess this one is Qatar. Just so
I believe
we have
so.
an argument about how to say it.
I think it's Singapore.
Could be Singapore.
Janice says Singapore as well.
Great airline. Janice says Singapore.
It's hard to say that this much greenery, but yeah, the Qataris are very resourceful when it comes to putting green stuff where it shouldn't. So, do you want to go Singapore?
Singapore.
We didn't have a good week last week, so.
Yeah,
it is Singapore, crowned the world's best airport for the 13th time.
If people want to know more about the Atlanta airport, they should read Barbarians at the Gate. RJR Nabisco built that airport.
Yeah. It's remarkable how much traffic goes through Atlanta, and that
it was a great airport when it was originally opened. It was made for the capacity that it had, etc. Since then, right, they run everything through it.
Oh yeah, I mean Delta is their main hub. So
yeah.
Question number 2: sleep researchers say which mental trick will help you fall asleep? Counting sheep, cognitive shuffling, counting backwards from 100, or repeating "I want to sleep."
We were speaking about sheep and Alberta. What do you call a man from Alberta with 2 sheep under his arms? A pimp.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry.
Lord.
I think it is repeating "I want to sleep."
What do you say, Tony?
I don't know what any of these things. I know what counting sheep, counting backwards, and repeating "I want to sleep" are. I don't know what cognitive shuffling even is, so it's got to be cognitive shuffling because I can't sleep.
That is a strong argument.
Yeah,
but I think it's saying "I want to sleep." I'm a big fan of the power of self-cueing.
What's up, Real DC? It is going well tonight. We talked about Canada.
Real DC has a bull in his logo.
Very nice. All right.
Dave, you got to split the tie.
I think it's cognitive shuffling too.
All right, do it. Cognitively shuffling off to Buffalo. Nice job, guys.
Takes your mind off your problems and your issues and helps you get more. I still have no idea what it is,
My
but
mind on my money and my money on my mind.
which
If I
means
can quote
nothing is
that.
on my mind.
Yes. If I can quote Snoop Dogg there.
Well, you missed my reference to when you said Long Beach was your favorite
I
airport.
didn't understand what you said.
I said because there's so much drama.
Also a good
Another
Dr.
City
Dre
Style
quote.
movie. Yeah, Dr.
Yes.
Dre. Yeah. Question number 3: which basketball team won the women's NCAA tournament national championship game?
I
Is
stopped
it
watching after
UCLA, UConn,
Texas was
Texas, or
eliminated.
South Carolina?
I appreciate the fact that they got all the Final Four teams in there, though.
That's good.
I'm going to guess it was UConn, but I don't know.
It was the University of Connecticut.
It was UConn.
Yeah.
They beat South Carolina pretty handily, 82-59,
Smoked them.
to win his 12th national title for Gino.
And that's
Hart.
interesting because South Carolina smoked Texas. So I think there was something to the idea that it might have been a letdown game.
It could have been. I mean, but it's how hard is it to get up for the national title game?
I mean, it's tough. You know, if you've just played an amazing game, there's something to that.
Because I mean, Texas was leading that game, and South Carolina really just kind of blew past them.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. But all right, question number 4: which British
scores? Go ahead.
Yeah, which British pop star was recently diagnosed with scurvy? Robbie Williams, Ed Sheeran, Sam Smith, or Harry Styles? I don't know.
I'm going to guess Sam Smith.
God help me, I know this one.
You do. Tony,
Very
I
nice.
do. And I'll tell you why I know this one.
All right.
You know, one of the movies that has been on our list of movies to see over here has been Better Man, which is the movie which is kind of autobiographical about Robbie Williams, where he is portrayed as a monkey. And it's Robbie Williams.
Shut up. I love Robbie Williams.
Wow.
That's
diagnosed
crazy.
with scurvy, describing it as a 17th century pirate disease. Essentially, it's true. Yeah.
He's with you there.
I tell you what, NBC did a thing. This is how long ago it was when Katie Couric was hosting the Today Show and Jay Leno was hosting the Tonight Show, and they switched for a week. And Katie Couric hosted the Tonight Show, and Jay Leno did the news on the Today Show. And
that's got to be a shock to the system.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it was interesting because Katie Couric's first guest was Robbie Williams, and he put on such an unbelievable performance. I never heard of him before. People aren't familiar with his music should listen to it. And I just want to make a scurvy note. One of the best factual books you'll ever read is called Scurvy by Stephen Arbone. And it's about the doctor who solved the mystery of scurvy and allowed the British to conquer the seas.
Very nice. All right, question number 5. Which of the following often called the silent killer has recently been tied to the deaths of several Americans traveling abroad?
I know this
Altitude sickness, carbon monoxide, heat stroke, or electrocution. I know this one too. Happened to the son of a former Yankee player.
Yep. It's carbon monoxide.
Yep.
That would be my guess too.
Yeah, Brett
anybody who
Gardner,
lived in the North knows the potential there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they added the egg smell to rotten egg smell to natural gas.
Yeah. Now, do you know the famous story about that? God, I can't remember which utility it was, but in order to train people for this, they sent out postcards with a scratch and sniffed that smelled like natural gas. But what they didn't realize is that just in the process of going through the mail, it sort of started to smell. And so, like 1 million places in the city reported gas leaks.
Oh my God. Wow. All right, question number 6. Why did the United States Naval Academy remove 381 books from the Nimitz Library? Mold. There were rare first editions, content about race, gender, and sexuality, or pornographic content. I'm going to say it's probably that race, gender, and sexuality.
It's DEI.
Got to be a TEI thing. I'm agreeing with you guys on that one.
Yeah. They took out Grace Hopper's biography, who the people who don't know, Grace Hopper is a famous American admiral who's also a very famous figure in computer science. Sad.
What a world we live in. All right, question number 7. Alex Ovechkin scored 895 goals, surpassing Wayne Gretzky as the NHL's all-time leading scorer. What team does he play for? This was an easy one for us. Capitals, Bruins, Hurricanes, or Canadians?
It's weird that they only gave us 3 NHL teams here, though. Only 3 answers on this one. Only 3. Only 3.
I tell you.
Okay, the artist formerly known as the Hartford Whalers.
Thank you.
All right. I did enjoy any team that has 3 Stahl brothers on it doesn't count as an NHL team.
Wow.
I did enjoy that picture that was floating around of Gretzky with Ovi on draft day, and then the flip of him, breaking the record. That was nice.
They do say that McDavid is well on his way.
McDavid's got a shot.
If he stays healthy, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Up until this year, Alex Ovechkin's remained relatively healthy.
Yeah. And the difference is too, Ovechkin is a big guy and Gretzky was not. McDavid's pretty big.
And Gretzky scored most of his goals before the end of the 80s. His goal production into the 90s was way down.
Yeah.
Ovechkin's still pumping in 40 goals a year.
Yep. That's true.
He literally could, if he decides to extend beyond next year, which is the end of his contract.
He could hit 1,000.
He can get to 1,000 easily.
Yeah.
Health is the big thing. But yeah.
But I'm telling you, we were just talking about Winnipeg too. I watched the Winnipeg Blackhawks game. Fucking Bedard is a sniper. That guy is an unbelievable shooter.
Yeah. Question number 8. The NBA fined Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant $75,000 for making which symbol with his fingers during a game? A peace sign, a middle finger, a gun gesture, or thumbs down?
Well, let me just point out.
Gun.
Yeah, Shooter McGee gets no problems in Happy Gilmore.
Did you see that they're going to do a second Happy Gilmore?
I did not, but I'm glad everybody's still alive except for the grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say gun gesture.
Yeah, it's a gun gesture.
You're probably right, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's ridiculous, like a peace sign.
Peace sign or thumbs down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is a way that if the peace sign is like this in England, that means that means this.
Yeah.
It's different.
Do you know why?
No.
So at the Battle of Agnicourt in 1350, assembled British yeomen with the longbow defeat the knights of French chivalry because they've got these big 6 feet long bows that they shoot up in the air and the arrows come down and they can pierce the armor.
Yeah.
So the French, when they could, to disable the longbowmen, would catch them and cut off these 2 fingers. And so to show their defiance to the French,
I got my 2 fingers. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Right. It was gun gesture. Morant was previously warned by the league not to make the gun gesture with his fingers. This is kind of like the zero tolerance policy in schools where kids that draw or have eaten the shape of a gun into a Pop-Tart.
Yeah.
Were expelled and given suspensions.
It's a little silly. I mean,
it's goofy.
Considering the fact that
Oh yeah, Bob and Chubbs did die.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Great point on both of you. Talking about the gun gesture though, remember the NBA had the Washington Bullets, who then changed their name. Huh?
No more bullets.
Exactly. Who then changed their name to the Washington Atomic Bombs. So
no, they are the Washington Grand Wizards.
They are So they changed their name to an act that Donald Trump can approve of, the Washington Whiz.
All right, question number 9. Which animal has been terrorizing an English village for weeks? Cow, badger, wild boar, or hawk?
I don't know this one, and I'm worried because we're 8 out of 8 so far.
I know we're riding a perfect streak here. I
The,
think
the
it's hawk, but I could be wrong. It could be badger.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, I want to go with badger because in the last one, laughing, um, one of the comedians told a joke where he said, as even if you're on vacation, you should never fuck a badger.
Hmm.
Neither of
Yeah,
you
that's
will enjoy it.
That's a solid advice.
I don't
You know,
know.
my initial thought was badger, but then um,
I'm trying to look at what's behind what the blob is here.
I'm squinting at that. One, it doesn't look like a badger. Two, are there even fucking badgers in
Oh,
England?
for sure there are badgers.
There are badgers.
Yeah,
I'm still.
Mr. Badger and Wind of the Willows, classic character.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
true.
my guess is going to be cow because all three other animals would be natural terrorizers. That's my guess.
Solid point. I'm kind of with you, Dave, on hawk. I one squinting at this, it looks like a hawk, and two, I don't know. I think the English would just offer the others tea, and it would be just fine.
Yeah, there are not enough guns to shoot the hawk out of the sky. So,
All right, we give him well, unless you got something else, I think we go with the guest.
let's go with the hawk. It's
Nice
correct.
job, Tony. Nice job.
Score. Male
Oh,
hawk. A male Harris hawk was captured on Thursday, ending a string of around 50 attacks,
Wow, that's
drive-bys.
impressive.
All right, 10. Question number 10 for a perfect week. The National Weather Service is ending which of the following? 7-day forecasts, translations of what? Oh, probably because it has
Exactly.
in
We
there,
already know.
translations of weather alerts,
Yep.
tsunami notifications, or hurricane coverage.
Right. They're only going to have lations of weather alerts now. No trans.
I I actually think it is translations of weather.
Yeah, it's the DEI
It
one.
is.
Yeah. Spanish speaking people don't need to know what the weather is.
Donde este el hurricano?
Yes, the Weather Service has paused translations because its contract with the provider has lapsed, and it's not just that, but I mean, and I guess with the tariffs and all that bullshit,
Yeah.
Reducing the number of foreign ships coming into the United States, maybe one thing, but a lot of ships use those translations because the crew may not be fluent in English.
Yeah. Now, the one interesting thing I will say about that from the IT standpoint is that I would rather they just publish it in English and everybody implement their own translation service because people do
Sure.
that anyway. But
Sure.
it's
You
still
can
stupid.
AI this solution
Exactly.
here,
Exactly.
but still, it's going to make things a little more dangerous for shipping and
It's
things like
the
that.
greatest AI story of all time is Google Translate. In the beginning, Google Translate started working, and you could play the telephone game with it, right? I translate something from English to French, from French to Spanish, Spanish to Italian, Italian to Russian, Russian back to English. And instead of saying, I want to go out to eat, it comes back and it says, I want to eat you out.
Yeah.
So that I'm really impressed with having come up with that on the fly. But so then they put infantile AI on saying, how can we make translations better? And they ran a mirror system. And one day the engineers came in and they found that their mirroring system, rather than doing the 80 million translations a day that Google Translate was doing, had only done like 3 million. And they tried to figure out what was happening, and all of a sudden they realized there were no translations happening from English to Spanish, which was the number one translation. They're like, what is going on? The AI had figured out that instead of having English to every language, they should make a master language. And so now they translate English and every other language to the master language, and then the master language back to whatever the other language is. And the thing is,
So, do you think one day that we're just going to combine and learn the master language?
well, I mean, I am an Esperanto fan. It's a really interesting idea. And if anybody has read in my top 10 all-time science fiction series is the Riverworld series by Philip Jose Farmer. The first book is called To Your Scattered Bodies Go. And essentially, everybody who's ever lived is resurrected along the banks of this incredibly long river. And one of the things that they do, there are these people who spring up and they get called the Church of the Second Chance. And anytime you die along the river, you get resurrected along the river the next morning somewhere else. And so they spread Esperanto up and down the river so that everybody learns how to speak Esperanto and speaks back and forth. A very interesting concept. Anyway,
all right.
We're late.
10 out of 10. Way to go. Especially after last week. We were like 5 out of 10. So
I don't know.
It was our worst week ever. So thank you, Tony, for bringing some intelligence to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for coming to talk about the Canadian election. We'd love to have you back on anytime.
This was a good time. I really enjoyed this conversation.
We should have him back on for the Stanley Cup show.
Yeah. There we go. Talk about the cup.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this week on the Political Deep Dive. We will talk to you all next week. It might have to delay next week's because I'm supporting a software release that night, so I might have to delay it. But I'll let everyone know, and we might do a best of and just show a best of. But
are you going to be physically in the office for that release?
No.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Share your screen. Share the VA series.
Yeah, that would go over real well.
That's funny.
So, anyway, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will talk to you all next week or in a couple weeks. We'll let you know. So,
good night, everybody. Hit like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Tag your friends in the comments. We're up to 7,000 people watching, so let's make it to 10,000. That would be awesome.
There we go.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks everybody. Bye.